Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister comes before us today trying to sell us a deal that is already dead in the water. Not even her own Brexit Secretary could stand over it. Now, Mr. Speaker, to lose one Brexit Secretary is one thing. To lose two in a matter of months illuminates the chaotic nature of this Tory government. The number 10 front door has become a revolving one. You know, the Prime Minister talks about taking back control. She can't even control her own cabinet. As I said yesterday, the Prime Minister is desperate and is increasingly looking defeated. What is absolutely shocking is that Scotland is not once mentioned in the document. Not once, Prime Minister, not once has the unique characteristics of Scotland's devolved settlement been worthy of mention.
Order. The Leader of the Scottish National Party must be heard, and heard with courtesy. And indeed, very grateful for your sedentary observations, Mr. Graham, but I don't think they greatly add to the quality of our deliberations. Everybody will be heard. Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not once has Scotland's unique characteristics in a devolved settlement been worthy of mention, and yet 100 mentions of Northern Ireland, mentions of Gibraltar, of Cyprus, of the Isle of Man, but no reference to Scotland. Utter contempt has once again been shown to the Scottish Government, its Parliament and its people. Mr. Speaker, differentiated deals for Northern Ireland means Scotland can have its own differentiated deal. If Northern Ireland can stay in the single market, why not Scotland, Prime Minister? The Scottish Government have published compromise documents calling for justice. The Scottish Parliament has affirmed that position. Why does the Prime Minister ignore the democratically expressed position of the Scottish Government? What has happened to the claim of a partnership of equals?
Never happened.
Why are the desires of Scotland being ignored when we know that a differentiated settlement can be delivered? Why does the Prime Minister stand in the face of the legitimate demands of the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament? Well, you know, the Prime Minister can shake her head, but it's a matter of fact, it's a matter of reality. Show some respect to the devolved institutions. The price... Well, you can bay and you can shout and you can talk about it being dreadful, but why was the Scottish Government not consulted, just as Gibraltar was, before the Prime Minister went to Cabinet yesterday? Mr. Speaker, the price Scotland would be forced to pay is far too high, with lost jobs, household income slashed and our NHS under threat. Now is the time to get realistic and put sensible options back on the table, such as remaining in the single market. Mr. Speaker, the only credible compromise for which the SNP has consistently made the case for. This deal is dead in the water. It is now clear that there is not a majority for this deal or a no deal. The Prime Minister must go back to Brussels and extend Article 50 and tell Brussels that we must remain in the single market and the customs union. Anything else, Mr. Speaker, will lead to economic chaos and crisis. Prime Minister, do the right thing and we will work with you. Stop the clock and go back to Brussels.
The Prime Minister.
Can I just pick up two key points that the right honourable gentleman made? First of all, he made a reference to Scotland's NHS being under threat. In fact, Scotland's NHS depends on the Scottish Government, the SNP government, determining the money. It's no good him pointing. He's no good in pointing his finger at me. We ensure that in the NHS settlement, the Barnetised settlement means more money comes to Scotland, and Scotland has chosen not to spend it all on their NHS. That's an SNP decision. Just to...
Order! Order! I protected the right honourable gentleman quite properly a moment ago when he was being brayed at in an unseemly manner. But having asked the question, let me say to members of the Scottish National Party, they must hear the Prime Minister's reply with courtesy. Don't worry, everybody will get a chance. But the Prime Minister's responses must be heard with a basic courtesy and respect. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was then going to pick up the points that he made in relation to Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is not staying in the single market. What is within the documents is that in order to ensure the frictionless trade across the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, Northern Ireland will be meeting those regulations specifically in the goods part of the acquis, but it is not staying as a member of the single market. And he talks about Scotland being given the same treatment as Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland has a very particular set of circumstances. It is the only part of the United Kingdom that will have a land border with a country that is continuing as a member of the European Union. And that is why, together with our commitments in the Belfast Agreement, that is why Northern Ireland is dealt with separately in the withdrawal agreement. And then finally he complained, much of his statement was a complaint that Scotland was not specifically mentioned in these documents. Scotland is not specifically mentioned. Scotland is a part of the United Kingdom.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Can I say that I have always wished well to my right honourable friend, and my question is in this light. To say to her, I have deep, deep misgivings on reading much of this overnight, that there is a real issue with the way that we will be treated with the backstop. And I say to her that when you read this, you realise that we are locking ourselves in to an arrangement from which we seem unable, therefore, to have the sovereign right to withdraw. That seems to me to be the biggest single issue here, which strips away the one thing that we said when we wanted to vote for leaving, was that we took back control. So can I say to my right honourable friend, my concern is that we have the sovereign right when we want to leave the UN. We have the sovereign right when we want to leave NATO. We have even the sovereign right when we want to leave the EU. But we do not have the sovereign right to leave this arrangement.
Prime Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend for his, and he says that the references to the backstop do raise some difficult issues, and I fully accept that they raise some difficult issues, and I fully accept that across the House there are concerns in relation to the backstop. Indeed, I share some of those concerns. These have not been easy decisions to take. It has been necessary, as I explained, and it would be necessary in any deal that we were striking for our future partnership with the European Union to agree a withdrawal agreement, and it has been clear, and we wanted to commit to ensure that we delivered no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. It has been clear that that withdrawal agreement needed to include this insurance policy. But if I may say to my right honourable friend, first of all, he talks about being held in the backstop. First of all, the backstop is not necessarily what will happen, because we want to ensure that the future relationship is in place before the backstop is necessary. Secondly, it will be a choice as to whether we were to go in that circumstance where there was an interim period needed before the future relationship came into place. We would be able to choose a preference between the backstop and the extension of the implementation period. There are pros and cons on both of those sides of the arguments, and there will be honourable members who have a belief that one is better than the other. There is a mechanism for coming out of the backstop if the backstop is in place, coming out of the protocol. That is a mechanism that does, and he's right, it does require mutual consent. It is for both sides to agree that. It is, and I won't make any, bones about that. But it does enable that backstop to be replaced in a number of circumstances. Firstly, of course, crucially, if the future relationship supersedes it. It used to be the case, it was the case originally that that was the only point at which it could be superseded. It is now the case that alternative arrangements could replace it. But I repeat what I have always said, which is that it is my intention to work to ensure that such an arrangement is not necessary and we are able to go into our future relationship when we come out of the implementation period.
Sir Vincent